Hi, my name's Matt Forsyth and I'm from the organisation All We Can. Do you remember that moment back in March 2020 when we were put as a nation into national lockdown? It's going to be one of those questions, isn't it? Where were you when? Well, the answer probably was at home. But you see, that moment was defining for us here at All We Can as a movement because we were inspired by that amazing passage in Colossians 1:17. It speaks about in Christ all things hold together. Ever since that March lockdown of 2020, we've been doing just that, holding together. We've been creating social spaces where we've been having conversations with various different people from around the church. It's been inspiring and encouraging. And we continue to meet to this day on a Wednesday and Friday. We've had amazing guests on. Here are some of the most incredible guests we've had on in our 117 broadcast. Here's some of our highlights for you to enjoy now. Amazing. Well, Joanna, we've been so delighted. As you said, you've been doing some filming for All We Can for the Big Church Sing. And this year's theme of the Big Church Sing for our Easter special is all about good news. And so, what does good news mean to you? And I guess maybe just want to share some of your own testimony within that and kind of what you've done. You've mentioned CBeebies as well as what's the best production you've been a part of. Maybe you want to mention a bit more also about kind of your career choice and and what's good news for you, Joanna?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's so many things I could say about good news. I think for me, when I think about good news, it's anything that makes me smile. It's anything that kind of pushes me from one place to the next. And funnily enough, just this morning, my son said to me, why is Good Friday called Good Friday? Surely it should be called Sad Friday.
Yeah.
Because actually it's called Good Friday because we look back on it and know that it's a good thing and know that there was a good thing that was going to come. But actually, when it happened, it didn't feel like good news. Sometimes things happen in our lives and they don't feel good. But when we look back on them, we know that God was in it, and then we can call it good news. And I think sometimes it's not always, for me, when I think about good news, it's not always just looking at it the way you see it today. It's knowing that God is with you and he's in everything, and everything that you do, whether it's good or bad, a challenge or a trial, but there's good news. And so I love that God's taken me on such a journey. As you mentioned, my career, I started off as a dancer and actress, and I really didn't have anything that that said or looked like I was going to be presented. I didn't have connection there, or I just didn't have anything. I didn't have an agent who was going to back me and send me places. All I had was my willing heart. I knew I had this gift as well, and I know that it was for me to be able to do the job that I do.
Is there, a good news hope or a hope thing, theme story or kind of a hope thought that you want to leave on our way? Is there kind of a hope that you're holding on to, maybe for yourself, but maybe for wider as well? Kind of, is there something that is kind of key? Is the question.
Really good question. Is there a hope thought? I think hope is like an anchor, isn't it? And I think for me, even in times when I think, oh gosh, this just looks bleak or challenging, I feel like that hope, when we hold on to hope, it's what keeps us grounded. It's what keeps us connected, to God, and knowing that, like we said, no matter what the situation we face, even if we have, we feel like we're in despair, actually that hope is something, it just helps us. And the end result, the end is going to be good news. It promises us that he's working on our, we can't see it, even when we don't hear from him. And that's for me, that's
for those that maybe don't know you, Noel, maybe see you part of the big church scene. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Noel, in terms of what you're into and what you're currently doing too.
I would describe myself as a worshipper who happens to be a worship leader. I would, describe myself in those terms. But I'm a fun-loving guy, just easygoing. My heart is to see revival across our nation and across the world, and everything I do kind of like has that kind of DNA in it. So that's my heart.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when did you if you said you started playing guitar at age 8, was it? So when did you kind of start 6? When did you, when you once you picked up the guitar, when did you feel like worship? Was there a moment, or was it kind of a journey?
That came many years into the journey, because my consciousness was, when I started playing at 6 years old, my son, my dad, my community guy, and our churches, growing up in the Black Pentecostal churches, it was very much a real community. So I became one of the musicians in that context. So the beautiful thing about it is that I grew into being the music director of my church, which was based in Northwest London, and we didn't have the term worship leader within the church community that was ever used. There was a singing team, a music team that had singers and musicians. So we never had the word worship. So I evolved into that place because I began to realize that I started talking about worship a lot and encouraging people in worship, and then had to lead it myself, which I had to lead the song service. And I realized how many. That's when the term for me became alive, and I ended up being Graham Kendrick's guitarist, and ended up being Ron Cano of TV, being a session musician. So I played sessions for lots of, at the time, pop acts and different artists from around the world. So from that point of view, I kind of fell into it. I think worship leading for me is not a musical expression, but it's a calling, if that makes sense. So for me, that's how it worked.
As a worship leader, as a worshipper, to kind of maintain, I guess, your own worship spirit in the midst of lockdown, with the participants worship that in this season, because obviously a lot of us are talking to camera quite a lot and worshiping to camera. So how have you found that as a worshipper?
That would normally happen, but one of the things that as always for many years has been at the root of what I do, but it's actually been in the revelation of who God is, and part of my journey as a worshiper is I've had to learn to find music. First was because we oftentimes attack or have to. So, for example, going to church on a Sunday, it was stripped away from us.
Yeah.
Do you still part of the connection being that? Actually, what this season has been is a total for people. So to create the platforms, not just out of what I do, but out of the revelation of what Jesus is saying in that moment, and what to me about the reset and how I could help people travel along that journey. Reset.
Yeah. That's
find you have to build into your faith text of no walls. That picture, so this amazing just speaks to the woman at the well, And he goes, you guys have prepared a mountain basically to worship God, but you've done all these external things that point to him, but you still don't know. But is actually the basis for worship, because the true worship is response to the revelation of who Jesus is. So who is Jesus? Who is Jesus in what you've been going in those moments where it's not visible by every Jesus? What is he saying to you? Things like being aware of his nearness, being aware of him in everything you do, key. And if you walk with that kind of attitude, you find him in all the most amazing moments, you know.
Well, fantastic. Well, we're here with Mari and Scott from Celtic Worship. How are you doing, both of you?
Hello,
yeah,
Matt.
we're great, thanks. How are you?
Do you know what? I'm doing well, doing very well. It's good to have you both actually back here as a part of the Big Church Sing After Party and a part of the All We Can movement in your worship styles. And you know, tell us a little bit about, obviously we got to taste it and sort of experience it as a part of the Big Church Sing, your style of worship. Tell us a little bit more about the Celtic Worship style of worship, if I can use those words. Tell us a little bit more of kind of how that came to be, and a little bit of that backstory too of how, you know, you guys have found your position, you know, to continue to use the platforms that you have and the gifts that you have. Tell us a bit more about that story.
Yeah, so Celtic Worship started maybe 4 years ago, was it? Yeah, and I think, yeah, so growing up, like I was saying, I became a Christian really young, and my parents were Christians, and my mum, I think, had always wanted for me to use my music for God and to worship. And obviously I did that by playing in church on Sundays and other ways, but you know, that wasn't my main job or whatever, for a better word. So I think she'd always hoped that for me and prayed that would happen. So anyway, there was one day Scott and I were up for Christmas, I think. We were playing some tunes just together, some worship songs. I think it was in Christ Alone we actually were playing together. You were playing on whistle, playing on fiddle, Mum was playing piano, and then it just felt so natural playing that type of music, worship music, with Scottish Celtic instruments. So from there, we kind of asked the rest of the band, who were all our friends at the time we all knew of, and they were all full-time working musicians, but we're also Christians. So we asked everyone to just have a rehearsal together. The only person we didn't know was Steph, and someone had mentioned getting in touch with Steph, and it just really organically came together. We did some rehearsals, and we were going to play at Celtic Connections, which is a festival held in Glasgow. We really wanted to do a church service because there's people that travel from all over to come to Celtic Connections and see lots of amazing Scottish folk music. So we were doing this one concert or worship morning at church, and yeah, that's how it started. And then the style that's come from that is it's all really natural as well. I mean, like, I was brought up playing Scottish music, playing fiddle, that's my instrument. Scott's instrument is bagpipes and whistle. So he was immersed in that tradition growing up. And then the rest of the band, they're also from Scotland, so they were brought up with that as well, but they bring their own flavours. So, you know, Gus and Chris were more jazz musicians. Naomi's a singer and an actress. And then Steph does everything, bluegrass, classical guitar, and Daddy, the drummer, he's incredible at everything as well. So I think all of our different styles just contribute to the overall sound of Celtic worship, but we're really, I think worship music just lends itself to these instruments and this sound, and it's kind of obviously, you know, God's created this amazing world, and Scotland's, like, we love Scotland, it's such a stunning country, and just like looking at the landscapes, the instruments, just the sound just fits with that because it's the sounds of the land here in Scotland. And I think those two connections together is where the sound comes from for Celtic worship. It's very much organic, natural, and just how we'd want to play them, I suppose. Is there anything
love that.
Out there?
Yeah, natural worship, I think, and all the sounds we make are just, we try not to overthink it too much and just do what we naturally do and what God's made us to do. This is what it sounds like.
I know for myself and for those watching too, who have experienced the worship music that you put out and encourage others to be a part of. But that is actually, it's so true what you said. It's natural. It comes across that way, and spirit led, and just it is such a unique sound as well. And that's why we're so delighted that you're a part of the big church scene, because I think, Celtic Worship, you bring something to the table, which, so often, it's the thing that we didn't know was missing until we got to experience it, if that makes sense. And I think that's the biggest compliment I can give it in regards to, because actually, so often you don't realise what you miss until, it's there, or it's not there anymore. And actually, Celtic Worship, what you bring to the church, we bring to worship as a whole, is just such a blessing. And I really want to encourage others to come be a part of what Celtic Worship are doing, to experience it for yourself, because it truly is unique and it truly is impactful as well. When did you, what was your faith encounter, with Jesus? When did that moment happen for you? Because we've heard the different stories at 170 of people encountering with Jesus. When did that moment happen for you?
Yeah, age 10, mum and dad got divorced, separately encountered God, remarried, got involved in their local churches. So through my I guess my teens, I was aware of God. I went along to church with them. I heard about God, but I didn't fully encounter him until I was 18, backpacking in Australia. There I just met some people, and they took me everywhere, surfing, boxing, to a small group. And by the end of the week with them, I knew I wanted what they had. And so they simply just said, it's Jesus. And then I remember giving my life to Jesus then, age 18 in Australia.
Wow. And so what was that like for you to encounter Jesus in a different country? Because, obviously you had kind of encountered the church and community here in the UK with your own kind of experience. But what was it like encountering Jesus in a different country and then coming back to England, kind of like always having that, mountaintop experience, that great experience abroad, but then coming back, almost like, was it like coming off holiday, kind of, those holiday vibes where you kind of go, oh, or was it actually like you came back on a high and just carried on that way?
Yeah, well, the thing is, when I was in Australia, when I was in England growing up, I was always told that thou shalt not, this is what you can't do. And so for me, I saw the religion, I saw the rules. But when I encountered Jesus in Australia, a lot of just living life to the full, just, didn't need highs from any other substances or alcohol or anything. They just literally just loved Jesus. Once I'd been a Christian for a couple of years in Australia, I wanted to come back to England, because I just thought if I could come back and help just one young person encounter Jesus, then it'll all be worth it. So I could have stayed in Australia because I've got an Australian passport. My old man was born in Adelaide. So I felt like I felt God saying, give up the beaches and the barbecues and come back to England and do what you can in the rain with, we do get a barbecue once a year, don't we?
Well, we do. We had a nice spell, didn't we, at the start of lockdown, and just in the midst of that, didn't we? That first time, a bit of nice barbecue weather, and so that journey then to, church leadership. What was that journey for you like? Was it a kind of one which just seemed to open, things just seemed to happen, or was it one that was kind of almost a struggle? What was that church journey into leadership like for you? How did you feel? How did that experience go for you?
I definitely had to be proactive, because I came back to England age 18. I said, Mum, do you need a youth pastor? She said no. I said, Dad, do you need a youth pastor? They said no. So I got a Christianity magazine. I don't know if you know Christianity magazine. At the back is all these jobs. And there was one saying, how would you love to come and be a youth pastor in Canterbury, help young people here? Called them up, went for an interview. And the interview was cool, but the second half of the interview was going to Pizza Hut with 30 young people, and my heart broke for those young people. So ended up doing youth ministry in Canterbury for about 4.5 years. Met my wife at this camp called Soul Survivor. She was going to Hillsong London at the time, so I started coming along because of her. Then just ended up coming on staff at Hillsong, and I've been on staff with them for 10 years now.
With the services that have happened online, one particular one which did, hear it all we can, kind of prick our interest. That we were like, oh, this is really exciting, even more than it normally is. Was actually, you mentioned, did a whole service based around Wesley, John Wesley. Tell us a little bit, kind of where the inspiration came from to look at Wesley and Wesley's life in long form over a sermon. Kind of where did that kind of begin, creatively speaking?
It actually started with Gary Clark, who's the lead pastor at Hillsong London. We were just sitting down talking about, 2021, and we just thought, why don't we take the beginning of the year just to look at different moves of God? And I heard a story just not too long ago of Billy Graham when he was a young lad, and he went to Wesley's house and he sat down, put his knees in the same spot where Wesley used to pray, and he was just praying to God, do it again, do it again. And I think for us, we're praying to God. We pray that all the time. Do it again. And it might look very different to what's been in the past, but I think we're always, I guess, just excited that God has moved, and He is moving, and He is going to move. And we just want to make sure we're listening to God to see the church be the vehicle, moved in the way that He wants it to move.
Yeah, and one part of that sermon, and I really want to encourage people to YouTube it after this. Really encourage you to YouTube that sermon, and we'll try and find the link and put it in the comment section as well. People can click on it because it's amazingly done, and hats off to all of you, for kind of weaving it together. Is that you've spoke about, and I know what the global leaders of Hillsong have reflected over and over again, the Houstons, about how it's message over method. Message over method. Just explain to me what that means. Just unpack that a little bit for those that maybe are hearing that for the very first time, that it's got to be message over method. What does that mean, especially as it relates to, I guess, what you kind of unpacked in that Wesley sermon?
Yeah, definitely. I think the message is what Jesus Christ was about. It's what the Bible talks about. It's a message of faith, hope, and love. It is the truth and grace, and we're never going to change that. The moment we change the message is the moment when what we're doing is no longer Christ-centered. But the method of how we convey this and share this with people, is there to be innovated and changed. And in John 4, Jesus at the well, and the woman who's had 5 husbands, and the one she's living with isn't a husband. He says he is living water to her. Why? Because he's by a well and she's thirsty. So he's relating the gospel to her in a way that she understands. But yet in John 6, he says he's the bread of life. Why? Because they're hungry and they're about to eat. So Jesus was communicating who he is the same way, but how he communicated it was differently, because he was just making sure that the people could understand. And I think it's our job to do exactly the same. Not innovate the message, but simply the method. And Lego has always, done that. My grandparents had Lego, my parents had Lego, I had Lego, and I can't wait for my boy to be able to watch a full movie, because we're going to watch the Batman Lego movie together. But can you imagine if the Church of Christ had innovated like Lego, not changing the message, but just a method from generation to generation? Then we wouldn't see this spike and then this decline, spike and decline. We could just see the church moving forward, I believe, the way Jesus intended it to be.
Yeah, amen. Were those guests absolutely incredible? The thing is, we've not actually stopped there. There's so many more still to come. So I want to encourage you to head on over to our social channels on Facebook or YouTube, and also on Twitter. Give us a follow, give us a subscribe, give us a like, and continue to be a part of this movement as we continue to #hold together. I can't wait to see you at the next 117 broadcast on Wednesdays at 117, and also on Fridays. Can't wait to see you there. God bless. I'll see you very, very soon.